Ooh, hey y'all. I'm already crying, so you know it's gonna be a grief video. Um, I've already been struggling with grief with my mom loss this week. It's been really hard to experience hard things and then have to go out into the world and still be strong and still do things. And meeting with my friend Kelly this week for Shabbat, for Pride Shabbat on my mom's birthday, which was also the yahrzeit anniversary of Princess Maloney's passing. It's been a rough week, hearing that I have a new boss, and then, you know, seeing that the job that we have is probably going in a different direction. It's been a hard adjustment, and of course emotions have been running high in general. And so then I think, well, I would love to be with my mom, even if I don't have a conversation with her, even if she's not willing to be comforting, just to be there, you know. So I've already been thinking about my mom, but today is Sunday, June 18th, 2023, and it is Father's Day. And I hate to say it, I don't really think about my father on Father's Day. He was with my mom, they got married, they were in love at one point, and then he got abusive and he became an alcoholic that was physically and emotionally and mentally abusive, and would yell a lot and not really parent a whole lot. And even now that he's sober and doesn't smoke anymore, doesn't have any vices really, he's still very much the same person in that he still has his own desires that he wants to put forward before anybody else. He comes first. And that selfishness, while I could see could serve somebody well if you really want to be selfish in a way that benefits you and doesn't hurt anybody else, I think that's great. But I think that his selfishness does hurt other people. And primarily, I think his selfishness hurts his children and his family. And so I unfortunately don't really think about him. But today I am thinking about my grandpa, because he was the only positive male role model in my life growing up, and even in my life until recently when he passed in February. I have had no adult male role models in my family or extended family, or friends that I consider family, that I really find as a positive male role model. He was the only one that never abused me. He was the only one that I think had any kind of positive upbringing, collaboration with my grandma and my mom. I think he, until the last 2 decades or so, when he was, I think, unfortunately quite miserable with his life, just not knowing what he wanted to do with his life and not having anything to look forward to, which really does bring somebody down. Your spirits are very low if you feel like you can't do anything and you don't have anything to live for. I think that's really where he was at. And he got sadder and more crotchety toward the end, especially after my mom passed. I think that really broke him in a lot of ways. I don't remember ever seeing him cry when I was younger. Maybe he did, but I don't remember it. I do remember him crying when my mom passed, and he came to say hi to me, and I was crying, and I didn't want him to see me crying, and then he was like, "Stop it," and then he started crying. And I know he means well when he said stop it. He was trying to just not deal with his own emotions, which I think was part of his few faults. But he always, when growing up, was there for me as a father figure. So today is hard. Today is very hard. I didn't realize until recently that the loss of him was going to be a lot more painful than I thought. And that's weird to say, but, you know, I think with my mom, she only lived to 52, and that fucking sucks. And while I sometimes say I will be grateful if I make it to 52, and I truly believe that. I am thankful and grateful for every single day that I have, especially after losing people. And I try to make the most of it, and I try to brush off the shit that doesn't matter, and I try to move forward, and I try to have a positive outlook on life, because my grandpa is one of those examples where if you don't have a positive outlook on life, you will just be miserable. And so I've always constantly fought the negative feelings that I have. It's not that I don't have them. I'm sure that he and I have very similar thinking processes, just like my mom, and negative self-image and confidence and all of that. But I fight it so much, and I seek education so much, and I'm sad that he never did that, because I think that if he did, he might have been happier and better off, especially in the later years. But I think that losing my mom broke him, and before that, just kind of succumbing to retirement and not necessarily keeping up hobbies or keeping physical. There were a lot of things I think that he could have done to make his life better, for sure, but shoulda, woulda, coulda, and it's not my choice. But I will say that I loved him anyway. I just wanted to share a few things that I just shared with my dinner party people. Excuse me. I didn't know how to say grandpa when I was a kid. I don't know. I said grandma perfectly fine. I didn't know how to say grandpa. And so I called him Bagaga for a very long time. I think until I was like 4 or 5. Simply because I did know how to say it by 4 or 5. I started calling him Bagaga when I was like a year and a half, because I was a very early language developed child. I knew how to read, write, and speak well, and also do cursive by like 2. So I was a very like advanced kid for language, but for whatever reason I couldn't get his name when I was younger. And so I think that's special in and of itself. But then also, even though that was his like nickname, I continued to call him that for a few years, until really like kindergarten, I think. But he loved his cars, he loved fixing cars, he loved working on trucks or tractors and stuff. That was his job, being a machinist, cutting parts, and then working on repairing vehicles for International Harvester, which provides a lot of the engines and working parts for semi-trucks and tractors and other kind of farming equipment as well. So he always did that as his job. And he loved that. He loved working on cars and thinking about collecting cars when he was outside of the job as well. And then he also loved his camcorder. Loved the shit out of that when he had that. Would always put it back in its bag when he was done, make sure that he would clean it and polish it. He loved taking care of things in that way, and really appreciating them, I think, because he grew up during the Depression and right before World War II. And I appreciated that he would always record me in the backyard. And I'm very sad that those recordings are probably lost forever, because my mom had them, and then she, made some copies and distributed them to my grandparents at some point, but not all of them. And so all of those recordings of me and my brother and my mom when we were younger together as a young family are probably lost, because my stepdad has them now, and I don't know if he's willing to share. But I just remember when he had me on camcorder, usually I was in the yard between the house and the garage in Chicago where we lived in the suburbs, and it was kind of like a garden area / green area where we could just play, and we would have an above ground pool, and we just kind of splash in the pool. And I remember wearing like a sun hat and like a diaper or a bathing suit or something, and coming up to him, and just him, like, as I'm coming up to him, like saying like, look at all that meat and no potatoes. And that might actually be a memory from a camcorder, but I remember it pretty distinctly, and so that's possible. But all that meat, no potatoes, I always thought that he was calling me a fat kid, to be honest. I mean, in the Midwest, you eat meat and potatoes. That's what you eat. And to say like, oh, you have lots of meat and potatoes on you means that you're just like big boned, right? You have a lot of weight on you. And now that I'm reading into it or thinking about it more, he said all that meat and no potatoes. And I think what he was trying to say was that, yeah, I was a fat kid, and so that was a term of endearment for him, and it kind of made me feel bad all my childhood, kind of remembering that he would say that. But now that I'm thinking about it, he said meat and no potatoes. And potatoes are the starchy part, right? They're the part that is carbs, that turns into sugar, that turns into fat. Meat is strong. It's muscle. It's tough. Especially if you're a Midwest cook, or if you come from a Midwest family, they like their steaks pretty well done, and I don't. But my grandma would always cook it until it was a hockey puck. And so, how strong are meat and not potatoes from the Midwest? Pretty fucking strong. And so I'm thinking now, I'm reinventing this idea of what meat and potatoes means. When he says all that meat and no potatoes, I'm thinking he's saying, like, yes, you have weight on you, but it's all strength. And I didn't really think about it that way until now. I have been, I would say, arguably, the strongest person in my family. Ever. I didn't know a lot of, like, my mom's cousins. I met very few of them. We come from a big white family in the Midwest, but I would say from the people that I have met and the issues that they've had and the inability to handle them the way adults should, yeah, I'd say I'm probably the strongest, most resilient person in my family. And I'm not one to toot my own horn, so for me to say that is big. And it's also why it makes me emotional, because I don't acknowledge my strengths very often. And this week has been a lot of challenging moments with my mental health and my strength, and I look at myself sometimes and I say, what the fuck are you doing? You're not doing anything with your life. You're not going anywhere. And then I stop and think about it, and I have to really remind myself, like, I'm in a full-time job, and possibly a full-time job I might not like too much more in the future. Midge's on the cactus. She's going to probably jump on the back. I'm struggling with school because it's a lot of reading, and it's not my strength. And right now I'm recording when I should be reading my homework. But grief comes up, and it stops me from doing the things I want to do in the order I want to do them in. And so sometimes it takes me a long time to complete things, and I think, why can't I just get my shit together? I also think about, my grief, and I'm like, why am I not better with my grief? It's been 4 years. I'm going to have to remind myself, well, my grandpa just passed 4 months ago, and I lost a friend last year that I really care about. And my brother lost his dog last year that I really cared about. And my other friend lost her cat last year that I really care about. And so there's been a lot of loss in my life. And I'm not acknowledging that as something that's going to keep hitting me down. And I'm doing all of these hard things together, concurrently. And so when I think about my grandpa, I think about, shit. He was a strong person when he was younger. He worked so hard for so long, and maybe he didn't have good mental health, and maybe he didn't have mental health resources, or maybe he didn't feel like he needed mental health support even when he did. And so he had some issues with that, with his emotions, with processing, with not snapping at people, with taking help when he needed it, and not being prideful. But man, he was a hard worker for a long time. And I think that when he says something like, you're all meat and no potatoes, that has to be in his own weird Midwest, whatever Brazilian generation he's from. I don't remember which generation it is. That is him saying, you're as strong as anybody. And being the firstborn in my family, having to be the strongest in a lot of situations, I think he was right. fucking 35 years ago, he was right. So happy Father's Day to him. I love him. I miss him. I really hope that he and my mom, my brother's dog, his sister who passed away from COVID, and his parents and all of our ancestors are just together in peace wherever that might be. I don't pretend to know what happens after this life, but I do really hope that there is some sort of rejoining, because I miss my people and I really want to see them again. And I don't want to have to see them tomorrow because that scares me, but I would love to see them again. And I think that I could say that I lived a long, fulfilling life. If I'm able to do something with my life, I'd feel confident and proud about that. And also if I could see them again. You know, even if I only live until 52 like my mom, I'll take it. So happy Father's Day. Sorry this video is fucked and sad, but I do really remember him with fond pride. And as much as he was ornery at the end of his life and really just a pain in the ass, he did a lot of good in this world, I think. And that's the part that I'm missing. That's the part that creates a hole in my heart and in this world without him. So, bye y'all.